And we've still got risk and finance to come on the agenda. So the trajectory continues to be upwards in terms of excitement. So may we then move on, please, to item 6, which is Jane's paper on patient safety, collaborative proposals.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to update the board really on some of our response to Don Berwick, and the Don Berwick report, which as people know was published last year, said something which I think is really important, which was the best and the single change the NHS can make would be to become the system that is devoted to continual learning and improvement of patient care from top to bottom and from end to end. And I think that was a really important statement. And in response to that, we are proposing the development of patient safety collaboratives. And that programme will be able to create a really comprehensive, effective and sustainable improvement across the NHS, and I think, or NHS funded care. And I think that's something that is, in response to what you just said, actually is really exciting and really important. And I think his challenge was for it to be a whole system response and not one that is in pockets of sort of isolation or pockets of brilliance. So something that we really do across the whole system. So what we're proposing is that we support every part of the NHS in England with everybody involved, and that means every single system, both for patients, for providers and for commissioners. So the proposals have got two major strands, and those are both very closely linked and interdependent. So we're proposing the formation of 15 patient safety collaboratives. They will be set up to enable sustainable local continued development, and I think that's really important. This is something that will have a national overview, but is something that will be done locally. So we will engage with patients, carers, staff, providers, commissioners in looking at improvement both at a local level but with some national oversight, and I think that's really important. But we'll also develop system-wide capability for patient safety improvement, so a really significant focus on learning and developing that capability for both system leaders, people that are leading organisations, leading the commissioning of improvement, but also to develop a series of improvement fellowships. So we have over a period of 5 years, up to 5,000 fellows who are experts in patient safety, experts in safety improvement, who will be able to work at local level to support that. We have recently, and since this paper was written, had 120 experts in the room looking at these proposals, looking at developing them. What we're very clear about is that this is not something that will be decided nationally and implemented locally. This is something that will be developed with local leaders, developed with people who will be responsible for delivering this programme. And that was a really positive day. And we ended up with some very clear themes that came out of that. And the most important of those themes was that patients, their carers and families would be at the core of what we do. So something about living our values and actually making sure that our values are actually interpreted locally. That priorities should be set locally, that there would be a strong focus on measurement, that we would be inclusive of all staff, and we would have a very simple vision about what we were trying to develop and achieve, but then that would really focus on learning, on sharing, on improvement, and not on performance management, because that, as Don Berwick would say, moves away from the importance of actually the NHS becoming probably the safest system in the world, but one that is focused very much on learning and development and on complete transparency. So very open about patient safety, very open about where we get things wrong, but actually learning and spreading that development and learning. And we're talking about, we have said though that we would like to have a few key things that everybody will look at. So focusing on leadership around patient safety, around measuring safety, but concentrating in the first instance on pressure ulcers and medication areas, but then allowing local organisations to pick what they wanted to do and setting up a series of topics, all of which are really important, but actually locally people can actually identify what's best for them, what they're going to focus on and what they're going to improve. So I think this is a really, really exciting programme. It's a programme that will run for a minimum of 5 years, and it's one that I think will really see an improvement in the safety of patients, and one that I would urge the board to support. So I know we're running a bit late, so and the paper is there. So I'll leave it there, but I'm very happy to take questions, and I hope the board will respond positively to what is a very exciting programme.
No, it's very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Could I just one simple question for assurance as how this sits alongside CQC responsibilities, and that we're not overlapping or there's any confusion about overall lines of accountability and responsibility?
No, I don't think it overlaps at all. We are working very closely with CQC about how we measure and support the patient safety across the country. This is about improvement. This is about local ownership. It's about the CQC aren't responsible for people to improve. They're responsible for for reviewing, for assessing, and for commenting on what's in place. This is about individuals. It's about patients. It's about carers. It's about staff coming together, looking at what they can do, and learning and improving. And that's about individual responsibility. And our NHS England, with the oversight of patient safety and the patient safety responsibility, enabling people to do that.
Okay, thank you. Margaret.
I'm really supportive, obviously, because it's just the main objective is really key improving safety and setting the right culture. Can you just try to take soundings from time to time to see whether people feel it's time the local arrangement that's been adopted hasn't turned into too much of an industry?
I think that's a really good point. We know in the past that perhaps people just sat around and talked about improvement. I think we will be the key here is about measurement as well. So I said one of the really important things is that we measure, and that we're able to show that we're actually improving patient safety. And I think there are mechanisms to do that. We know that in response to both Francis and to the Don Berwick report, we have said that we will set some very challenging aims, that we will measure that we're doing that, and we will publish that. So the patient safety dashboard that will be live later this year will enable us to demonstrate really clearly where things are improving at a very granular level. So absolutely, this is that we will see improvement, and where it's not there, we'll very clearly be able to see that and look at why not.
Obviously, it's incredibly important, but 15 PSCs doesn't sound like local to me. How does it feel to people out there, really? That's pretty big, isn't it? Covering a pretty big part of the country.
I think what we've looked at is identifying the PSCs, or the patient safety collaboratives, around the size of, for simply the HSNs. That doesn't detract from local teams and local systems working together, but supported at a level of the 15. Certainly when we had the sort of learning, the day where we were looking at developing this, one of the things that came out of that very clearly was that this needs to be locally owned and locally driven. So I think it's a fair challenge, but the key for us is to have the support at the area of the 15, but that locally people would determine what they wanted to do. So I think you get the best of both worlds. You'd get the economies of scale for having people linked to 15 collaboratives, but we would be absolutely supportive of people developing this locally and looking at local systems, local teams, putting that in place. And what the paper talks about is a desire to have everybody engaged across the system, and it talks about that being done, by 2018-19, which is actually quite a long time. But that is not every provider. It's about every single part of the system, whether it's NHS funded care, being part of these collaboratives.
Could I just ask when we could have a report? When would it be sensible to have a report back? I think we don't want to wait till 2018.
Absolutely not. No, we're saying that these systems will be up and running in this financial year, so the 14-15 financial year. So I would expect us to be able to come back at regular interviews. So certainly later in 2014-15, we would be able to report back very clearly on how we're developing, what's happening, what's looking like. And we could certainly have local teams being able to report locally on what they're doing. We could look at that and bring it back here on a regular basis if the board would like to see that.
I've got a number of people signalling that they'd like to come in, including Victor, David and Kieran.
Yeah, I think this is good stuff. I mean, how can it not be? This is good stuff. I just note that the patient safety topic areas, suggested essentials, seems to be obvious, but in relation to parity of esteem and mental health, I just wonder where the connection is. I would assume that everywhere you would want mental health to be incorporated as an essential part of the. But could you just say a bit more about that? Because the implication might be, if I've understood this right, that it might not be.
No, it is. I think if we look at Appendix 1 of the paper, in that we've got topic areas, but we've absolutely across there said that people with mental health needs, people with learning disabilities are two of the key priority areas. So I think it's around. It's absolutely looking. It is essential because it's about looking. It's about looking at importance of people with those particular issues alongside that. So it's really difficult to say we're going to actually identify one area or two areas. So yes, we've talked about medication areas. Yes, we've talked about pressure ulcers. But we're also saying that within that patients with mental health needs, learning disability are absolutely key.
Chief Executive.
Just a couple of things. I mean, one of that I think is a really good challenge, this parity of esteem challenge, because I don't think it's really quite been made in the way that Victor said. So I think it's worth us rethinking, having a think back about what it actually means in these circumstances. And I think it's a really good point. We should do it. But the other thing I want to make is that. There is a danger in all of this that we kind of that there is confusion about who's doing what to who in what order, and that we take a whole set of responsibilities, things that we simply aren't capable or able to do. And where I would refer people to back is the National Quality Board, which is the organisation that brings all of the various organisations together. Spent quite a lot of time working out in terms of the new system. Who's responsible for what. And as you know, quite a lot of emphasis over the last year or so has been brought onto the regulatory bit, the kind of inspection, or quite right, I perfectly understand why that is, but all the focus on that. But the particular responsibilities that commissioners have in relation to all this are all about setting out the path for improvement. They're about setting goals, but at least particularly for us, the issue of spread, about how you make, and that in a sense is the power of the collaborative. It's all about spreading best practice across the whole system, and that is perfectly legitimate for us to be engaged in. I wouldn't want people to think that we're somehow nationalising every patient safety problem across the country, because we simply don't have the capacity or whatever to do that.
Good. That's assuring.
Yeah.
Kieran.
Just a comment, just a plea for truly authentic participation. If anything's made for patient engagement, patient leadership, it's got to be this issue, because who suffers at the end of the day?
I think that's absolutely right. And what was interesting is the themes that came out of the day when the 120 experts sat together and looked at what we were doing. The number one priority that came out of that was that we really did put patients, their carers and their families at the heart of this, and that these patient safety collaboratives will not just be those that provide or commission service. It will be patients, their carers and their families as integral parts of the collaborative. And that was something that I felt was really important, and we will be able to measure that, look at it and demonstrate that we're actually doing what we said we want to do.
Good, thank you. That's been a very good discussion, and I think a number of important points made in discussion that I know Jane will wish to reflect on.